Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Just recently, I had posted a gameplay clip of my game Shadow of the Orient on my TikTok page, and somebody watched the video and posted a comment asking me what my level design process was. So I thought I'd kind of take this opportunity to kind of explain to you guys my approach to designing 2D levels for 2D games. Um, this being my first action platformer game that I worked on, I didn't really have a process in place to begin with, so I kind of had to figure it out as I went along. But I thought I would just kind of give you guys an overview of the approach that I came up with. So maybe it'll help you guys out if you guys are just getting started, maybe developing your own 2D platformer game. So, maybe some of these ideas might help you in, getting yourself prepared for the whole level design process, right? So I'm just going to go ahead here. I'm going to make my screen a little bit smaller, or at least make myself a little bit smaller. And you're going to notice here on my screen that I currently have my game loaded up. Right, so again, the name of my game is Shadow of the Orient. This is a game that I started working on, I think, mid-2020, when we were in the midst of a stupid pandemic and everything was in lockdown. I decided one night that I was just going to start building my own game because, I had nothing else to do. Everything was in lockdown. I couldn't go anywhere. Couldn't really do much socially. So I hunkered down and I figured, what the hell? I'm just going to start building my own action platformer game. The reason I wanted to do it is because over the years, I've been playing action platformer games since I was a kid, since the 80s. I grew up playing a lot of NES and SNES platformers. So when I was a kid, I loved platformer games. And then later on, probably like 7 or 8 years ago, I got back into platformer games, and I've been playing platformer games ever since. Like for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been playing a lot of platformer games. Games like Hunt Down, The Mummy Demastered, Blasphemous, Valfaris, so many great 2D action platformers that have hit the market over the last decade or so. And I think it's a really great thing that people are bringing these platformer games back because I think they're awesome, and you know what I mean. And I've always been a huge fan of pixel art. So when I set out to make my game, I wanted to create it with pixel art. That was a given. So the idea for this game here initially came from another game that I had developed back in 2015. It was a web game called Wang Fu, and that game had like an Asian theme to it. So I pretty much took the premise of that game and kind of restructured it or rebuilt it for this new game called Shadow of the Orient. So the main character looks very similar to the character from my original game, Wang Fu. So I wanted the main character to look similar to the original character, but the rest of the universe was entirely built from scratch. So when I first started building the game, I hired a pixel artist to help me do the tile map, or do the tile palettes, which you'll see down here in Unity. I have all my tile palettes set up. And basically, after I had the tile palettes designed, I kind of started piecing things together in a sandbox scene. So I'll show you guys what I did here. So this is a sandbox scene that I created where I pretty much did like a quick layout of how the game was going to look, more or less. And I also used this particular scene to test out all of the obstacles that the player is going to be confronted with throughout the journey. So if I zoom in here, you'll see that I have my turrets. Let me just check that off real quick. I have my switches, I have my turrets, I have my moving platforms, I have my ladders, my spikes. I have some enemies in here as well that I was testing. I have my pendulum boulders here. I have these are some other boulders here that kind of just come down and slam into the ground and then kind of retract. I have my checkpoints here that I was testing out. And then what do I have over here? Canvas. Okay, now I was just testing out the main player as well, testing out the movements and everything. So I think when you're starting out your game, I think a good thing to do right off the bat is just create a sandbox scene and just play around with your tile palette, start to get things into place, and kind of start to see how you're going to use your tile palette for your game. Right? I think you need to get familiar with your tile palette really well and how you're going to build things for your level design. Right? And it's also a good opportunity to test out all of your obstacles. Right? And then maybe give it a couple of play tests as well with the main character to see how everything interacts, how the collisions interact. So I think that is a good starting point to get just to get a sandbox scene set up so you can test out your universe, test out your enemies, your obstacles, so on and so forth. All right. After that, after you get your sandbox scene all set up and you're satisfied with it, then you can jump into actually designing your levels. So now I'm just going to come right off the bat here and say that designing levels is probably the hardest part of game development. It is not an easy process. And a lot of my ideas for my level designs actually came from a lot of other games that I've been playing over the years, right? And there's also a lot of pop culture influences in my game. I took a lot of ideas from different movies that I loved, that I watched growing up, that I loved very much. Movies like The Goonies, Indiana Jones, all those type of movies. So like a lot of my obstacles are just ideas that I pulled from different movies, and parts of my level designs are ideas that I got from playing other games. So there's a lot of inspiration that I drew from, a lot of references that I drew from as well. But ultimately, when you're designing your level, the key thing to remember is all levels typically move from left to right. So you start off at point A, which is all on the left side of the map, and you want to traverse all the way across and get to point B, which is the end goal, and then you clear the map, right? So you'll notice here that there's a general pathway that leads straight to the end. Okay, so there's a general path that you want to follow, just to get from point A to point B, and I'll quickly draw it out here with my pen tool just to give you an idea. Let's see how this looks. All right, so you'll see here that this is pretty much the general path that you can take to get to the end of the stage. All right, there we go. Right? So that's the general path that you can take to get from point A to point B. But of course, along the way, you want the player to go off and do some exploring and, discover some secret areas, open up some chests or some other items that they can kind of, some other items that they can unlock or discover. And of course, and of course you want to have loot along the way as well, so players can pick up loot and use that loot to purchase items in your game. Okay, so I'll just zoom in here and I'll show you, for example, how I set up some of these levels. So here's all my tile maps. I have secret areas in here. So my secret areas are on a separate layer. I can toggle those on and off so I can see them. All right, again, more secret areas over here. Yeah. So the general idea here is, when you're creating the main path of your game, I think the best place to start is by creating the main path for your game. So go in and draw out the main path from point A to point B, and then along the way start to kind of carve out other areas that the player can explore, right? And how you come to the conclusion of getting from point A to point B, that's entirely up to you. You know what I mean? Typically what I like to do when I'm starting out, let me just create a new scene here. Let me go to new scene. Actually, let me go back to my sandbox scene, because I already have this set up. So I'll set up with the tile palette. So typically what you could do when you're starting out designing your levels is you could just start to draw in a general path, right? So let's just say this is kind of like where I want my player to start. This is my ground. Right, and then, okay, here maybe I want to have like a water pit. And then we're going to traverse a little bit more, and then maybe we're going to have a couple of steps that he's going to have to go up. So it's kind of a thinking process as you're going along and you're designing out your levels, right? But this is typically what I like to do. And then maybe I can have like some platforms up here that the player can jump on, maybe have some other areas up here. Right, and then maybe this area here can kind of maybe get closed off so he doesn't go up to the edge of the screen. Right, and then of course up here we can have another area that he can kind of go off and explore. But this is typically how I like to start off my level designs. I just start to draw it in, right? Right, and then maybe here we could have like a double path or like a double platform up here, and then he can kind of descend downwards over here. I don't know, something like this, right? And then maybe here he's got to jump up some walls and maybe avoid some obstacles. And then one thing I like to do also is kind of jot down some notes as I'm going along. So for example, maybe here I could have like a ladder, like a one-way platform with a ladder. So I could do create empty. And I'm just going to call this game object ladder. And where exactly did that go? I turn those off, so let me turn that back on. All right. So what I could do here is I could just jot down a quick note. So I could put like a note here for a ladder. I can duplicate that, and then maybe here I can make this like a one-way platform. Platform, and I usually like to color code these as well. So maybe orange will be identified as platforms, and these green items can be identified as ladders. And if I want to put like some obstacles here, right? I usually associate red with obstacles. So maybe here I can have some turrets. Right, so maybe I can have, or actually, I could have a group of turrets, or I could have maybe like one turret here and one turret here, and then I could have another turret over here, right? And then these areas could be, maybe I could have like some statues in here shooting out fireballs as the player starts to ascend upwards through this path over here. But this is pretty much my general approach to how I start designing my levels. And so, like I said, I usually like to draw out the main path first so I can get from point A to point B. Right, so I'm not going to create an entire level here because there is a bit of a thought process behind designing your levels. There have been situations where I started designing a level, I got maybe halfway through my design, and then I just started all over because I felt like the flow of the level just wasn't really working. Because there's a lot of playtesting involved as well, right? After you create this kind of initial, prototypical layout, it's good to give it a playthrough and see if everything works, if it makes sense. So this is typically the approach that I like to take, right? I like to go in, just kind of start to carve things out, and I like to just create these little empty game objects that I use as a point of reference, so I know exactly what I want to do in this area. Like, have a one-way platform, have a ladder here, have some turrets, and that's basically my general process to designing my levels, right? There could be situations where I'm kind of stuck and I'm like, well, you know, I mean, maybe I might get up to a certain point and then I'm like, well, what should I do over here now? Should I, should I close this off? Should I have him maybe, go upwards and have this whole area here closed off? And then maybe we'll have him go up. Right, and then maybe we can kind of have this go on an angle, and then he kind of goes up this way. Right, maybe you can go that way there, and then maybe this area here can kind of just branch off into a separate area on this side, where maybe there's like a chest over here that the player needs to collect. Right, so you can come up here. And then maybe from here, it all kind of connects. Right, so this is just to give you a general idea of one approach you can take to designing levels. Right, so I mean, this isn't looking too bad. Right, so again, we have our general path here that takes us from point A all the way to point B, which is the end of the level. But again, along the way, I mean, you can create branches in that path where the players can go off and do some exploration before they circle back and go back onto the main path, right? And there may be situations too where the path maybe branches off into two different paths. So for example, maybe I can have a path coming out this way, and then I can create a platform here, and then I can create another path going up this way. Right, and then both of these paths can kind of lead all back into the same area, back to back to the main path, right? So I can go down like that, I can go down like that, right? So you can go up or down. You can either go, vertically. So you can either go up or you can go down, but it ultimately leads back to the main path. Right. So guys, this is this has just been a quick demonstration just to give you guys an idea of how you can just go about and start designing your levels. I do also have a notepad that I like to keep close by if I have some ideas for something that I want to do, like in my level or something like that. I'll quickly kind of draw it out on my notepad, and then when I'm actually building my levels, I'll draw it out in the level editor or in the game engine, and then of course play test it and see if it works or not. But that's pretty much the approach that I take. Again, like I said, I do play a lot of games. I do take a lot of inspiration from other games that I play when it comes to designing levels. So for example, I'll give you an example here of one inspiration I took from Golden Force, which is a great action platformer game that I really enjoyed. Let me hit don't save here. That was the wrong level. I put level 5. Right, so you see here that this is one of the finished levels for my game. And you'll see here that once you kind of figure everything out, you go in, you start to fill it in with all the details, all of the different layers, start to put in all your obstacles, and then everything kind of starts to come together, right? So so this so these moving platforms over here, initially when I designed the platform, it was kind of just moving left and right, but there was no visual aid for the player, so it was kind of hard to determine when the platform was going to end and when it was going to retreat or return back to its original starting point. So when I was playing Golden Force, I noticed in Golden Force that they were using these visual aids, which I thought was a great idea. So I decided to add those visual aids into my game as well, right? Because I just think that they work really well. And also, sound effects also come into play here. When the platform moves, you can actually hear it moving farther away from you. And then as it starts to return, you can hear it coming closer. So that's a good way for the player to determine whether that platform, how far along that platform is, whether it's far away or it's currently returning. Yeah, so, here's one of my finished levels, and, at the end of the day, I ended up creating 15 levels for my game, and I think it maybe took me 5 or 6 months to get all the damn levels done. Like, it was a lot of work, maybe even longer, I don't know, but it took me a long time. It took me a very long time to do this on a part-time basis, like I'm talking like 2 to 3 hours a night. And yeah, it took me a hell of a long time. Originally, I wanted to do 30 levels for my game, but that would have taken me double the time, and I said, screw it. So I decided just to stick to 15 levels. And in the later 2 acts of my game, Act 2 and Act 3, because I was creating less levels compared to a lot of other mobile games on the market, I decided to make the levels longer, so players get more gameplay time, out of their play sessions. Yeah, so I mean, the game, if you actually go through the game from beginning to end and you actually discover all the secrets and rescue all the children, there's at least a good 2 to 3 hours of gameplay here in my game. So I mean, it's not too bad for a mobile game. I've played some mobile action platformers that have taken me like half an hour to clear, right? So yeah, so here, I mean, if you're gonna play the game from beginning to end and discover all the secrets and everything, you're gonna get a good solid 2 to 3 hours out of it, guaranteed, right? Yeah. So you'll see here that when you're going in and you're designing your levels and you start to add in all the details, here I have waterfalls in my map, I have this cave background tile, all of my foreground elements that interact with the player. I have all my lights in here, all of my obstacles are in place. Yeah, so I'll give you a quick playthrough here. Let me hit play. Okay, let's put the game over here. And you'll see that after you finish designing your level, everything just comes together nicely. Yeah, so there you have it. I mean, once everything starts to come together, it actually feels great, because I mean, you invested that time to create something, and once it's done and you start to play it, and you get other players starting to play your game, and you start to get their feedback on level designs. Like I've actually had a few players who played my game and they made suggestions on some parts of the level designs, saying that some things were a bit confusing or some things were a bit too difficult. So based on that player feedback, I went back and made changes. So the game that you're seeing now, a lot of changes were made during development. Like after I finished designing my 15 levels, I had my pixel artist play the game. I had other people play the game, and I collected a lot of feedback based on their game experiences, and that led me to make quite a few changes, in my level design process, right? So, I mean, guys, that's pretty much a breakdown of my process to designing levels. I'm still, this is the first Unity game I've ever built. A lot of this is still a learning process for me as well. If I ever do decide to build another action platformer game, I'm going to have a much better footing of how to go about creating it. Hopefully I'm doing it on a full-time basis, so it doesn't take me as long, but if you're creating a platformer game on a part-time basis, it's going to take you a while to build it, especially if you're building, big complex levels. And I would consider these to be pretty complex level designs. I mean, you can just look at this one here and you can see that there's a lot going on, right? And if I show you some of the other levels, I mean, some of the other levels in my game are even bigger. So you'll notice here, like this one's pretty big. Yeah, so there's a lot going on here. So anyways, guys, I hope you guys found this video useful. This is pretty much my process to designing levels, and hopefully, if there's anything else you guys want to learn about, let me know, post it down in the comments below, and I'll give you guys an overview of my process and how I like to get things done, right? So anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.